Hey everyone. So, a number of folk reached out to me recently about a news story out of Texas. Some of you may have seen this. It kicked around social media a little bit. Yeah, some drunk guy named Eric Yasso broke into, or allegedly broke into a neighbor's house and gave him a bit of a drubbing. But that's not the account that actually went into a police report. What the gentleman, the assailant, said was, no, it's not my fault. I thought I was entering my own home. I used my key. I unlocked the door and I encountered a stranger in there. And sure enough, as the news reports indicate, the police checked it out, and they're like, yeah, his key absolutely opens his neighbor's door.
The key to one home unlocked the door to a neighbor's. That's how Bexar County deputies say a man who was believed to be intoxicated was able to mistakenly enter the wrong house.
According to the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, the suspect's keys to his home unlocked the victim's front door. Investigators say they checked the keys to verify that, and that was in fact the case. We're not sure how that is, but believe it could be an issue with the builder of the homes. So we asked him about the keys working for two separate homes. The person who answered my call said they would look into it and get back to us.
All right, if I'm living in that neighborhood right now, I'm wondering, are there other keys out there that fit my home that belong to a neighbor? I mean, how widespread is this problem?
And this is a neighborhood that had, kind of a lot of sameness, a lot of, little boxes on the hillside kind of construction. So what gives? Well, this is more common than you might expect. It's not super ubiquitous, but it does happen. There have been a number of cases over the years, some of them rather high profile, one of them in particular very tragic, also out of Dallas, where somebody mistakenly enters the wrong, apartment or dwelling. There was, when Amber Geyer murdered Botham Jean, right? So police officer Amber Geyer coming off of a long shift, and she's talking to her lover she's having an affair with, not paying attention. And she approached what she thought was her apartment, but she was on the wrong floor of a building. This was in Dallas in 2018, you might remember. If you're curious what happened there, the specific details were never really talked about, like the lock-related details, because the facts of the case were so obvious that you don't have to talk about which brand of lock and so forth. My understanding from knowing some of the people who are closer to the case than many of the people reporting on it, so I do know for a fact. So these were SafeLock brand in-sync electronic deadbolts, very expensive locks in this apartment building. And the installers, in my understanding, is that they did not use all the included hardware that came with the lock in the box. They ripped out the old deadbolts and they said, well, we're putting these fancy electronic ones in. We got hundreds of them to do. Get to the next door. We're done. They didn't, take out the strike plate and replace the strike plate. So when the bolt work didn't line up perfectly, these deadbolts, at least in Botham Jean's apartment, had a tendency to not throw the bolt correctly, and the door wouldn't actually lock. So if you've ever seen this design, it's kind of a little black electronic key fob. And when Amber, puts her key in the door, instead of it seating so she could engage with the RFID sort of function, it just pushed the door because the door wasn't closed and latched correctly. The reporting was, she encountered an open door. Not really. The door was maybe ajar by a millimeter or two, but by the act of trying to insert her key fob, that's what caused the door to open. And I'm not going to get into the rest of the account because it's horrific what was done. And, she's doing 10 years in jail for murder. Another story that didn't make the news in the widespread sense, but it's an actual thing that happened. There was an incident in a Queens, New York apartment building. This was in 2000, thereabouts. And a person was, someone broke into an apartment. There was, an assault. And the victim, she got her lawyers and everyone was there. She's like, look, you have this apartment building. It's not safe. Somebody, I use my locks, because that's the first thing, a building management will say, well, you didn't lock your door. It's not our fault. And she's like, I lock my door like clockwork every night. I use the locks. I know what's going on. You guys, you gave someone a key. And they kept saying, no, we keep track of our keys. These are Medico keys. Nobody can make copies, which is, it's harder to make copies of Medico key, not impossible. But ultimately, I wouldn't have believed it if the evidence wasn't there. I actually learned about this from my forensics instructor, Tom DeMott. So they brought in Tom, world-renowned forensics guy, very, very talented, absolute expert witness. And it was literally, he said he wouldn't have believed it if he wasn't in a boardroom with, the building management, their legal counsel, the victim, her counsel, everyone, it was a court proceeding. It was an evidentiary finding. And they actually took the lock out of her door and in front of everyone assembled, all sworn in for evidence. he starts to disassemble the Medico lock. And he's like, okay, I got the first chamber. And as he dumped it, like a Medico, turning pin came out and a pile of freaking mastering wafers fell out of the lock. And he's like, that's weird. Next chamber, a bunch of fucking mastering wafers fall out of the lock. This lock had tons and tons of cross-keyed mastering involved. He's like, what is going on? And he explained to the court and everyone, he's like, this is wildly inappropriate. There's no reason for this lock to be this way. What happened? And then eventually building management had to say, what happened? They talked to their maintenance teams. And what they learned was that every time people moved in and moved out of apartments, they had to rekey them, right? Well, it was deemed too expensive to pay the original institutional locksmith who set up the system. And they're like, man, this institutional locksmith, they're charging, hundreds of dollars for every time they come out for a service call because it's a Medico lock. So what somebody did is they went on eBay and found a Medico pinning kit, which we've done. We have Medico pinning kits that Bobak bought on eBay long ago. But what they were doing is they didn't know how locks worked. And they could figure out how to get the lock kind of out of the housing. And Medico locks, you can remove the set screws out of the tops of the chambers. So you can just kind of drop pins in. And they would, all right, well, this key, we're not using this key anymore. That's the old resident. Put it back in the drawer. Let's get another one of our Medico keys, because remember, it's hard to get Medico keys. They just had a bunch of them. They said, okay, here's the Medico key, the new one. They put it in. And if they would just drop mastering pins in to let's go one, hit me, like a game of fucking blackjack. It's like, okay, cool, that's turning. Cool, we made it work. And then they would cap it up and put it back in the door. And they kept doing this as people moved in and out. And it turns out that most of the building was super Maison keyed, if you will. It was super cross keyed. And loads of people's keys in that building worked in other doors. So yeah, again, a freak occurrence. That one's really strange. And that's not what happened in San Antonio, though. I do not expect this. So the story coming out of San Antonio, this is a neighborhood. It's brand new. I tried to look at Google Street View and you really can't see much because it's literally the streets aren't even mapped yet. But the builder, MI Homes, is made, the news reached out to them and they're like, hey, what did you do? Why are these keys working in other people's houses? And they, we'll get back to you, which they said while simultaneously probably shitting their fucking pants. I almost guarantee you that this was just a big lot of cheap door hardware, and loads of those batches of hardware are keyed alike, both for ease at the factory. If you don't specify keyed different, a lot of times you'll just get keyed alike. But also, look at the next time you're at a hardware store. Look at the packaging of deadbolts or door handles. A lot of them will have printed prominently on them, keyed alike. If you have multiple doors, you want them to match, and they'll have what's called a blind code on the packaging. The blind code is not the direct bitting code of the lock, but if you can imagine running a password through a hash, if you type the same password and run it through the same hashing algorithm, you'll get the same hash result. You can do comparison. That's how we log into computer systems. Well, if you're just a builder or a constructor or a renovator, you don't really care what the bitting code of the key is. You just care that the locks all match. So yeah, look the next time you're at a hardware store, look for blind codes and then look at the other ones on the shelf and see how many match. They ship these all together in huge pallets from suppliers because if people want to make their keys alike all around their building, they want to find matching locks on the same inventory rack. Doesn't work so well, however, if you're a building constructor of a whole neighborhood and you're just using key-to-like locks. So do I think every single door in this little northeast San Antonio suburb is key-to-like? Maybe not, but some of them certainly are. I mean, the police said they checked and absolutely is true. This poor cat is going to get charged with a crime, which is what happens, right? And this dude was drunk, and if you're, no matter how much you screwed up, oh, it's not my fault, I was mistaken. If you punch somebody in the face and beat them up and they did not pose any threat to you, you're facing charges. So hopefully this guy, gets a good attorney. Maybe he's going to have some civil cause of action. I bet, honestly, the old gentleman who got popped in the face is probably going to have a civil suit against the builders and everyone else. This is America. Everyone's got a lawsuit against everyone. But that's probably what happened here. I'll throw in a screenshot of the actual door hardware that the news report showed. I haven't found it yet in any of my catalogs. It doesn't appear to be like an off-the-rack Kwikset or Schlage. It's the sort of the square insert that houses the deadbolt mechanisms lock. I don't recognize that offhand. So that's the story there. Do I think it's crazy? Yeah. Do I think it's completely unheard of? No. Do I think it's advisable to always change your locks when you can? Yes. I realize a lot of us rent. It's not always allowed by your, your management company. What is always allowed, however, and something I recommend a lot, is jamming or locking the door from the inside. If you're known to be home, you're not waiting for anyone else in your family who's coming home later that night. I have a few videos on this channel. I'll throw screenshots. I'll link at least one or two of them at the end. I really love this little Deadbolt door thumb turn blocker, this flip switch, this little metal flip down piece that I've talked about ages ago. It's still on every property I've ever lived in. I just put one on. I love it. And if you're, not doing something where you're going to take a door completely apart, like we're in an Airbnb right now. I'm obviously at Red Team Alliance. We got class starting tomorrow. We're staying in an Airbnb. What are we going to use? We're going to use one of our door straps. So absolutely, I swear to God, they're going to be back in stock this week on the website that I don't mention. But the Deadbolt strap, the thumb turn strap, I love it. We've been blowing through thousands of these because everyone is giving such good feedback. It is something that is easy to install, easy to I'll do a whole video about it later when we really talk about some special editions that we've got coming out. But just because, you've locked a door, does that mean no one can get in? No, it means most people can't get in. I mean, I can get in. My people in this class, they can get in. But if you don't want like a mistaken neighbor to come in, or even, maintenance, or the Airbnb host, or the housing like staff from a hotel where you're staying, always use a secondary mechanism on the inside of the door if you can. That's my favorite tactic. It's my best advice. And yeah, don't be too scared. This isn't common, and there was no malice, it seems, in this very tragic incident, but it could have been prevented. Could have been prevented by using a little door strap, or by the builders actually just keying all the houses separately, or the homeowner changing the locks the moment they took possession, which is something I always think you should do. Whether you're outside or inside, stay safe out there, okay?